Hi there, it's Mary at Insight Fine Art Studio. Thank you guys so much for joining me today. Today I'm going to be starting a new project. I don't have an exact set number of sessions that I'd like to spend on this project, but this project is going to be geared toward painters that are maybe at an intermediate level, and we're thinking about how to really structure the way that we work on paintings from the initial idea and the sketch all the way through that kind of awkward middle section, and then to finish a painting. And so what better subject matter to use for this experiment, this exercise, than a still life painting, because still life is everywhere. You all can set that up at home. You can find references or set it up from Life. I recommend from Life when you're starting out. So I just want to show you that process. And today I'll be starting with a charcoal sketch. That's something I haven't done in my live painting sessions before, I don't think. Let's see. There we go. And as we get started, I'm just going to make sure that this is going live. Okay, great. All looks good. If you have a moment and you could please like and follow, and even share this video, just like send it to someone. I always think that helps get this out there. And again, I'm open to any suggestions or requests that you might have. But as we get started, you guys can see the photograph of the still life setup. I'm actually going to be painting from life, but I have that, excuse me, up as a photograph. And just to get started, I'm going to go ahead and get rid of my palette view because I'm not using the palette. I'm going to be using, hold on, let me just make sure I can see where. Oh, here we go. We'll be using the palette later when we get into oil paint. But for now, I want to be talking a little bit about this plan. So starting out, as we look at this arrangement, there's a lot going on. Now, I've definitely geared myself more towards these chaotic still life arrangements. The more I paint, and I try to like pare it down a little bit for this arrangement. What do you think? Is it pared down? I'm not sure. But in any case, we are going to look at simplifying and finding a part of this arrangement that is going to work for this composition. I'm just seeing what's going to block the camera as I start working on this. But generally, I know I'm going to use a horizontal canvas for this. There's not much choice. And I think it's just a better format for this YouTube structure. So what I'm going to look at is just the big light and dark shapes that I might like to include. And if you can kind of, I'm going to make a little like viewfinder almost with my fingers just to kind of like look and see what part of the still life I'm going to be drawing. Okay. So I might do like grapes kind of in here. And these thumbnail sketches, they really allow you to develop an idea kind of quickly. I'm going to focus mainly on this curve, right? And I know these might be a little bit small on screen. If you can see what I'm doing, please do let me know. Make sure it's all. Here we go. That's a little bit bigger, so you can see that a little bit better. All right, so we're looking at the teapot. The handle might come up. And I like this arrangement is already kind of showing me like the overall shape is like an arc. If you kind of notice that. And maybe there'll be some like little cross contours to that arc. But the thumbnail is so good for, the thumbnail sketch is so good for like discovering the underlying structure of the composition. And that really comes across in a painting and is so critical to kind of think about. And it's really just a matter of locating the pattern of lights and darks in this arrangement of shapes. And I know if you can't see anything in this little charcoal study that I'm doing, I'm really sorry. I'm going to try and zoom in on it if I can, or bring it a little closer to the camera as I go. And maybe it's just not quite taking shape enough for you to see what I'm doing, but it shortly will, I do believe. So again, this one is about this arc this way, and then maybe that kind of shape. I'm going to bring this closer. Oh, excellent, Gary. Thank you. I'm just double checking here on my end a couple of things really fast. Okay, there we go. All right, so that is kind of the start of one. Now I should develop this a little bit more because, you know, you're here and you want to see what I'm drawing and maybe you can't even quite tell yet, but I'll give it a little bit more just for, really it's for the benefit of anyone watching that is not me, because I know what's going on here and this makes enough sense to me to be my idea sketch. I get it, like, and I kind of like it, but I don't know if it's absolutely coming across. So let me just develop it a little bit more specifically. Let's teapot a little bit. Fun. And then I'll just do another one or two sketches because I want to focus on that idea of like prep work for your painting and how it can pay off in the long run. And this prep work is really fun if you kind of enjoy brainstorming some ideas like this. A little drawing practice. There's a handle. There's like a shadow on the wall. And here's the ellipse, and we have like a little pattern. I even like the way the pattern falls, thinking of that composition. I like these little leaves down here. That could be great. This whole dark area, I'm going to emphasize the value pattern now. Okay, so this again is probably more than I would like need to do for my own purposes, but I'm going to show you a little bit more so that you can sort of see what I'm talking about. Now the value pattern is just like the big dark shape that runs through this whole thing. And we think about where it's contrasting dark against light and where it's low contrast, where it's high contrast and where it's low contrast. Right? And we have all these little light shapes kind of dotting through here. So, yeah. I feel like I really want this dark to come this way and out that way. That's a nice composition. I like the lightness here. I like this little arc this way. I see the pear in here. I don't know. Maybe I'm jumping into it too fast. Let's try another one. Let's see if we can't get a little bit of a different placement. It's not going to be easy because I don't have like a ton of options, but we'll see. Now we can crop. That's the one thing that you can always do. You can always crop. So I'm going to crop in just a little bit. And I feel like I naturally don't love to paint this side because it's very close to my easel and I have to stand like right in front of the camera to paint it. But I'm going to give this composition a go just to kind of demonstrate what I'm talking about. So I'm looking at that little vase of like a little succulent. Then there's the oranges, cherries here. And maybe I'll put like the focus much more on that table plane. Yeah, bigger picture. I'll show more of the vase. And I'm always kind of thinking like these like big arcing kind of pathway type lines. Maybe I'll crop the grapes, focus on the pear, make that bigger. Grapes. That's kind of weird. It's fun to try out some ideas though, and then you sort of see where like you're like, I don't know if that's going to work. That's going to be an additional problem that I want to solve before I get started. And so you think about the things that are going to kind of trip you up, and every drawing, every composition. Well, I mean, maybe not for you if you're just, you know, having a day and everything's just going perfectly. Maybe your composition just has absolutely no difficult issues to work out, to solve. But for me, I feel like this is a key, you know, opportunity to kind of get a little bit, you know, focused on what the value pattern is going to do in my picture, structure. And it really saves that kind of awkward, you know, searching for something placement wise that's going to work on the composition, right? As you're painting it. And I'm all about just like saving as much, you know, of the pain and suffering type work as I can. There's work that's fun, and then there's work that's tedious and work that you wish you weren't doing. You know what I mean? So I just feel like this process, and hopefully these are clear enough so that you can kind of see where I'm going. Let's get thinking about the value pattern. The background is darker than the pear. And let's see. Lightens up a little bit as it comes out, but it's still darker. We have marks, patterns, any particular directions that look very appealing to me. I'm going to try to note. And by directions, I was just thinking about this little pattern shape here. I think that's a really nice like bridge and reflection of that spout shape, right? There's just nice repeating elements. I like this little whirly flower. So they're very slightly different compositions. I just think they're two different things. And now I'm kind of curious which one I want to do. I kind of like them both. They're not the worst. So, you know, I feel like the advantage to the first one is that I can more easily see it. And for purposes of this little painting demonstration with the cameras and the very close space, I think I'm going to take this one here on the left, and we'll try and translate that approximately onto our painting. All right. That is the one. Let's do it. So I'll kind of put this, again, just a little bit closer. You can kind of see both drawings for a moment, if you like. They're very rough. Hopefully you get the picture, you get the idea, you get kind of the sense of like where the objects are going to fall, where the big lights and darks are going to go. And that should do it. So I'm going to put this someplace I can kind of see it. Let me. And Gary, you asked about a notan, which, I mean, it is sort of prep for the painting. I know this is maybe not as strict as Notan should be done, like with very precise values, but for me, this sort of does the job of like thinking about those compositional shapes that are based on the light pattern, the lights and darks. So as often as I do it, I'm always glad I do it. Sometimes I skip that part of a painting prep and I jump into the painting because I'm feeling very inspired. Honestly, it's something I could probably just say as a rule, I'm going to do that from here on out because whenever I do it, I'm glad. I kind of come up with my ideas a little more easily. I get sort of settled into the painting a little more quickly. And now I will switch to, there's this view so we can see the palette if that helps. And we are just going to start in on this toned acrylic canvas. I took I don't know, like a couple of colors, purple, pink, a little brown or something. And I just very thinly scrubbed that in with some water. So I don't, I don't think there's just one reason why I do this or why we want to tone our canvases before we start working. There's lots of reasons, but here's the most important ones for me. We want a toned ground because you can now build both darker and lighter. There's traditional methods of oil painting where you're going to start on that white ground and then take out the lights that way with an oil ground or with paint thinner, terpenoid, mineral spirits. You're going to kind of build the surface that way. I personally don't like the fumes of that, and I doubt that I will ever practice that method of starting a painting again because I don't like the fumes. I just feel like there's just no point to it either because we have this lovely acrylic paint method where we can put down the ground and then we can work right on top of that, both darker and lighter. So moving the paint around and thinning out the paint is the first order of business. We're just going to use the clean terp from on top of our brush cleaning tape. It's settled. All of the paint sediment goes to the bottom. And I focus on using transparent colors for this first initial sketch. And what we just did in charcoal, we're going to essentially slow this down a little bit. Use these kind of transparent hues, which are burnt umber and ultramarine blue and quinacridone magenta, and a brownish purple. We've got a large brush to fill in shapes, and we're just going to try and get like almost like a monochromatic version of what we just did in charcoal, more or less. Of course, better this time, always better. This next version is always going to be better, we hope. But it always is. It really is. You have that initial idea in charcoal. It's just a reminder to yourself, like maybe what you saw, So use that sketch, but we're going to kind of give it its own fresh take. So as I'm kind of working through this, I'm going to go very lightly. And I'm just placing maybe one little object, placing a little of the other. Yeah, we'll crop off some of the grapes. I can kind of draw lines between the objects. Like I see an angle between the top of the grape and the top of the spout. I still haven't really even drawn the objects yet, but I'm sort of imagining where they're going to go. This process, I tell you what, this is, I'm going to move the grapes down a little bit. I want to put the bottom of this pear a little lower. All right, there's just a start of the pear. That might mean this is coming a little lower. Might mean everything's coming a little bit lower. All right. Now that means we have more of the handle that is seen. Drop. Or a little bigger here. All right, so what we're doing is we're working around and we're trying to just, before kind of like locking in one object, you'll include like more of this space. Instead of locking in one object, I'm more trying to lock in like my general impression, and that can go back to those big dark and light shapes. General impression being like if you were to kind of half close your eyes, just really squint your eyes closed. And by the way, that's pretty much how I'm painting right now. And so we're focusing on the lights and darks, and we're not focusing on precise placement, symmetry. I'm more trying to see like where is there contrast? And you can just easily see that idea of contrast, right? It helps you just see in place these shapes. If you notice, I just held my brush up straight, and that's just so I can envision like where a straight plumb line or vertical line is falling, and what's going to align with my brush is going to be vertical on the canvas. I was actually looking for the angle of this little handle start. And somehow I want the shadow to be more prominent than the handle itself. Just a little bit bigger. So because I'm still like determining, you know, like where I want things to fall, like I don't love where that handle is falling. That's kind of an important point. Now in my sketch, it just kind of disappears, and maybe I'll just let that disappear and like only paint into this area where I'm going to see that handle. Yeah, maybe I'll just do that. This is a very dark area. Now you'll notice I am not going to be painting it like with a thick, dark coat of black paint to really drive that point home. But I am going to be focusing my little light wash here in the areas that are going to be darkest, because it's the relative lights and the relative darks that we're interested in noting on the canvas right now. And that's all we're doing. We're just noting the lights and darks. We are not painting. We're not trying to get detail. This is where I think a lot of people get really caught up, wanting to maybe jump into making it sort of look good first. Now, I'm pretty caught up in stuff, but I don't think it's in making it look good. I think what I'm more caught up in this moment is just making sure that I don't lose track of placement and get stuck with a placement that I don't like and have to like solve for something that I could have avoided. Because every moment in a painting, every moment in a painting, you're sort of like inventing problems for yourself to solve. All right, I'm trying to be a little bit more specific here so I can do some thinking about what is going to happen here. Okay, I'm going to do a little measuring too. Visual measuring, let me know if you need a refresher on like what's visual measuring. All right, I'm measuring the distance above the teapot. And by the way, I just want you to know the image that you are seeing of this painting is a photograph that I took, obviously, from a slightly different angle. And I'm just placing this handle with a little bit more care. Let's see that. We're going to show more of it instead of less. Decisions. It starts to become almost exponential, the amount of decisions that you are required to make in a still life painting. So I highly recommend you set one up as soon as possible. They are excellent because the more that I see, the more that I'm forced to simplify. So instead of looking at the pattern and looking at where the leaves are and looking at where my vase is, I just know there's something over here that contains a lot of chaotic small elements, but they are all dark. And I'm going to try to indicate that as soon as I possibly can. And as I think about that, instead of thinking cherry contour, make it look like a cherry, make this look like an orange, make this look like a bottle. I feel like, initially when I started out painting, that was definitely the concern because you're like, oh, I don't want this to not look like a bottle because I'm painting a bottle. So once you get more confident that you can at some point pull off, this blob is going to turn into a bottle, then you can start to kind of feel like, maybe I can almost just leave that go for a little bit. It'll become a bottle later. But the thing to sort of focus on is the big dark shape that is created by the arrangement, by the light and shadow, and how that shape can really move through, and it does move through different objects, and it creates the structure that you're working with. All right, bear with me 1 second. The camera might shake for just a moment. I just realized my little charging cable is not in. There we go. Should be good. Okay. And also just checking on everything my end. I just want to kind of make sure this is all up to speed. Okay, looks good. I'm always amazed when it's actually going well. And okay, here we go. So back to the idea of contrast, big darks, big lights. We just want the, just the big shapes. That's it. No detail, no commitment to here's the edge of this shape and here's this form and here's this object. We can figure all that out later. The real structure that's important is not the objects themselves, but it's like this dark that goes this way, that goes this way, it goes this way, that goes this way. That goes this way. Let's see. And as I'm placing these, I always think about verticals and horizontals. And so I'm looking for where's the opening of the little spout. And I project in my mind a little horizontal over from that. And where does that hit? That's kind of in the middle of that ellipse. And then there's some kind of folds and get that in. All right. Oops, that's very, very intense color, but that's okay. We're going to take a little bit of terp. And even this amount of terp, that's plenty. That's all I really needed. I could have done an acrylic underpainting for this as well. And that would have even saved me more of this oil paint fumey situation. But after we're working with less thinned out and transparent oil paint layers, the fumes aren't really at all for me, at least. They never seem to be a problem. Just want to keep some ventilation. I really like this. I didn't even notice this. This is cool. And I want to make a little note of it. But I like how the dark blue green fabric kind of creates, and I hope it doesn't look terribly different from what you're seeing. It creates this little like frame around that little succulent blossom. So looking at that is a really fun, I want to kind of note that to myself in some way without getting too caught up. Here's the little succulent blossom. And then here's the fabric, the fabric of that blue-green color. It's darker. So even without shifting color, I just know I'm kind of like reinforcing the idea that a darker value is going to go in this area. And it's all very subtle. So I have kind of like no information about where the vase is yet, but I know it's in there. And I know that, let's see, probably a little lower. Yeah, I think that'll probably be okay. And make it like a little darker so I can kind of see it, at least for now. And I'm just scrubbing that paint out so it's very thin, very transparent. And we're gonna note where this little all right. And I really want like a V shape here in the composition or something like of interest. So that was a pretty heavy notation there. I should probably fill that out a little bit color-wise. And I'll just go like a little bit more with the umber and flick the paint away. And look at how that just like took the saturation off. But I do want to note like a dark V-shaped element there. And that's probably going to be like the fabric and like a little background around those little buds or whatever those are. I'm going to try and get these opposing kind of curves. Like this one curves this way. And this one curves this way. And this is kind of dark against light, and the other one's like light against dark. And I kind of enjoy that little moment. And so here I'm lifting the paint with a brush that just has a little turf on it. And then we'll take more paint. And now we're adding paint below it. Brush that out. I still want the vase to be a little bit darker than the item behind it, than the background cloth behind it. All right, so now we're gonna go, and it's just like relative values. You're just sort of placing like here it's darker, here it's lighter. And that usually happens. We see this a little bit where objects are changing one from the other. And so, you can see everything's sort of in there. And now I'm like slowing down. I'm giving it like another transparent pass just to like more information, a little bit darker if necessary. I don't want to lose that idea of quinacridone pink. That background color was really painted so that I could go in with like very similar quinacridone colors, like the color that I toned the canvas with. Kind of thinking about like a very monochromatic, soft start. And sometimes brush strokes are just fun to make and you should just enjoy it. Like there's just something so fun about like just taking the brush with just a little terp on it and just like covering some ground and really scribbling with paint, transparent paint that then becomes description. I mean, can you beat that? I don't know. I don't think so. So fun. And that's what I really feel like oil paint has so many qualities of other materials, but it just combines them in such a great way. That's why it's my very favorite. So transparent like watercolor, that's kind of the goal that we are keeping in mind right now. You'll notice, excuse me, I have not used any white paint. I still can kind of scrub with like a cleanish brush, but I can sort of lift and scrub away a little bit still. And I do that to sort of move the line. I need to because this isn't in the right spot. And so, you know, at this stage, like moving things, shifting, that's what it's all about. We just need to keep calm. It's all going to be a-okay. Now let's see. This comes in. I'm projecting a horizontal line. I sort of find where that intersects with the pear. Looking up, I think I had the spout kind of coming out too far. We can also look at the negative shape between. So we're just moving that in little by little. The paint's a little bit dark in this area right now, so I could always come in with a cloth. All right. So I feel like that's getting there. That's a little better. It's a little unclear because everything's pretty dark. So I'm just going to keep working on it for a second. And then we can always darken in like behind it a little bit just to try and carve that out of the background. Let me lighten this part. There we go. All right, and I want to make sure to kind of have some little indications of this flower shapes. Mm-hmm. Now, darker or lighter, then you go around and you kind of look at all of your objects and you go, all right, let's see. Is the background darker than the object or lighter than the object? If darker, notice how much. Try to get a little bit more accurate with these relative values, if at all possible. Sometimes you're going to need white to complete this step, and that's going to be next, mixing opaque colors, that is, not just putting white onto your painting. So just knowing that there is a limit to how far you can go with this transparent drawing step, but by all means, go to that limit, because it is super helpful to have all of this done in transparent paint that you can still adjust and scrub and move. So just like charcoal, only you refine it a little more. Furthermore, whatever you are doing in this step, you're either going to expand if you're doing a more long-term painting, or you're going to, what is the word? Like truncate, condense, if you're doing more of a quick study. So, you know, this drawing washy stage, this correcting with loose brushwork, all of that, I think, happens, but it's just like so much faster in a quick study and so much slower in a very long-term studio painting, I think. Anything of these little marks could eventually be little forsythia flowers, right? And I think just this element of like those little darker leaves, that's an important thing to kind of note there. We just want to see like the spacing, and we want to see how everything's kind of lining up and sitting. And you know what? Look at how much time we have left. Our 16 by 20 piece. Pretty much we're at the end of this transparent drawing phase, maybe for this painting. You know, I could take it a little farther for sure, but I could also just start to get in a little color and do a little bit more information adding with color. Yeah, maybe I'll just start that next time. Yeah, we could develop this a little bit more. Let's do like 10 more minutes of, maybe even 15, of development of this sketch, just with, you know, I'm going to try to do as much as I can with the transparent colors. And we shall see. But I am going to need a tinier brush, so pardon my walking across. All right. Putting a little bit more paint out on the palette since we're kind of running a little low. And now I'll try and break these areas up into even further little bits of information. Let's see if we can't troubleshoot all the trouble that's happening with this ellipse already. Okay, gonna be okay. Measuring out, I feel like I've this side just a little small. Switching to that smaller brush because I want to just like create a little bit of more defined. I don't want a line. I'm not going to draw a line. I promise I'm not drawing a line. It might look like I'm drawing a line, But what I really am doing is I'm looking at that edge and I want a specific and slightly darker, sharper edge. So I got this small brush out so that I could kind of look for the darker shape that helps define the edge of the teapot in shadow. And I know that's probably a little darker than I'm going to want right now. I'm going to brush this out just a little, and hopefully we can still see the impact of that little mark. I kind of can. Now, earlier we were talking about how we have this flower here and it's kind of framed. So let's refine. Let's refine. Take out a little paint. And I can get very specific with like the angle, which I'm not really concerned about if it's the accurate angle that I'm looking at up there. It's accurate enough. And then the choice that I make is like where the composition needs that line to be. For my purposes, that's probably fine for now, and I could change it later. So we'll leave it and get a little more of this structure of this thing in. I just want a little bit more light. There we go. And we'll go back to painting on the form a little bit. Maybe even a little indication of the pattern in that shadow back there. Maybe there's a little bit. There we go. Kind of push some of that back into shadow instead of looking like an object in the foreground. Here we can put a deeper shadow within that little grouping. And let's see if we can't indicate the shadow on the ground plane versus like the object itself. Looking at like the top of this area, I want to make sure that I have these large enough and that the teapot comes down behind Clementine here. And is darker in value. And that's the main concern. Again, just thinking of like edges and looking at them not as color, but as just like what's darker, what's lighter. Doesn't matter what color it is. We're not using the idea of color right now. We're just using the idea of value. And value is going to be the underlying structure that kind of makes or breaks the composition. The most important way that like human beings see. So I think just using that idea as like the foundation in this little underpainting study is very helpful. It starts to build the important aspects of the, communication, right? Very quickly. And it's the most important one. Color is very important. Color is like everything, but it's not everything. And I hope you know what I mean. So yeah, I mean, color is great. Color is where it's expressive and you can get so much information in color and say so much about you know? I mean, just everything. Everything, everything, everything. However, we can still make sense of the world without it. Still adjusting where that's going to go. It's been quite the move. I want to put a few more directional marks in here, and those are going to be maybe a little more specific. Flowers. All right, so thinking about creating a sense of depth back here, like it just kind of recedes and goes away, but also also thinking about the directional quality that I need, which is this way, just for balance. And stepping back. Don't forget to step back from this painting, from any painting we're doing. I can see immediately we've got some symmetry issues here, but I think they're totally fine, fixable. Bottle back in. Helps to have a larger brush that you can kind of just like take and really blast through areas. And, you know, again, like just keeping whatever you want to stand out, a higher contrast, anything else, low contrast. You can kind of determine a lot about the direction of your painting at this stage of transparency. And, you know, I think it's probably something that helps us avoid that realization when we get to the middle of the painting. Something's not lining up, something's in the wrong spot. We're not liking how objects are relating, or the weight of the composition is shifting and we're not sure where the focal point is, right? All of these things, I think, are problems that we're just going to solve this right off the bat. And hopefully really pays off. And now I'm kind of going through, I'm softening edges where I might not want to see as much distinct mark or difference, or I don't want to deal later when it's totally dry with like maybe a ridge of paint or areas in here. So round and round we go. We're kind of aiming for a fully realized value pattern, enough information so that we can easily, if this still life got moved, I could probably set this back up just based on like what I've painted today, more or less. And overall, just this light and shadow pattern being established. And then hopefully we will be able to complete this painting without any major surprises, changes, or moves, right? Like we don't want, for myself, the way that I kind of want to plan this particular painting is to kind of have a vision of it and then just see it all the way through to the end. As I was saying that, I was thinking back to students who I've had that have like absolutely just been fearless with what they change or add on a painting kind of towards the end. and how well that's worked out for them. But you know what? Although there's always exceptions to the rule, again, I'm gearing this towards folks that have been maybe struggling with kind of getting lost in painting and want a more organized approach. So we aren't going to leave things to chance. We're going to really come through in a methodical way. And that's what I'm aiming to demonstrate and talk with you about today. So this might be where we kind of leave this for today. I really appreciate you guys coming by. If, let's see. If you would like to rejoin this painting next week, I will be continuing on the painting Wednesdays at 2 o'clock. If you have any questions, any requests, anything that you would like to see talked about here, or just even, you know, anything I have talked about, if you want some clarification, let me know. And please like, follow, and share this video if you would. I'd really appreciate it. And